It was me, and I'm off now.
Just log on. Can I welcome all members and officers to this meeting of Cabinet, which will be held hybrid in the Council Chamber and remotely via Microsoft Teams. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as is practicable following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote or locations or in the chamber. Please can everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point, but I would ask that with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all of the times keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from the Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. I would also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. Officers too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. I will now proceed to agenda business, and the first item is to receive apologies for absence from members. I have not received any apologies from Cabinet members, and I can see that all Cabinet members are present either in the chamber or virtually. We have had apologies from the Corporate Director of Communities, but we are joined and welcome to Zach Shell, the Head of Operations for the Communities Directorate. So we will now receive the declarations of interest, if any, from members and officers in accordance with the provisions of the Members' Code of Conduct adopted by this authority in September 2008. I can see that Councillor Williams has indicated he wishes to come in, and Councillor Blundell. So Councillor Williams first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I wish to declare prejudicial interest, I believe, in agenda item 4, care home fee setting policy. I have a close relative who's in a care home in the County Borough.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. Councillor Blundell is next, please. Sorry, Councillor Blundell, you're on mute. But if you're not, we can't hear you. Could you say that again, please? And we're still not able to hear you. Can you try again? He's left, so we will move on to Councillor Spanzik and we will return to Councillor Blundell. Councillor Spanzik, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to declare prejudicial interest in item 6, Care Inspector Wales report, and we'll leave the chamber at that point.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanzik. I do not know if Councillor Blundell has returned. He has returned to the meeting, and we will try him again. Councillor Blundell, please. No, we still can't hear you. We will return to you later in the meeting. Perhaps if you could try and rejoin again and check your system and check with IT, and we will, in the meantime, if you could send a note Well, he can't, he's gone now, but I will ask him to send a note of his declaration for the minutes, and I will read it out if he continues to experience technical problems. The next item we have is the approval of the minutes of the meetings held on the 22nd of February and the 14th of March. Can I have a mover that they are a true and accurate record of that meeting? Thank you, Councillor Farr. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Spanzik. Is everyone in agreement with that, please? Yes, thank you, colleagues. We'll now receive the first report on today's agenda, and that is a report of the Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing, and it's a proposal around our care home fee setting policy. Over to you, please, Claire.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm Claire Marchant, Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing, and this report that you have before you this afternoon is a proposed policy for Cabinet to consider regarding the implementation of a care home fee setting policy from this financial year onwards. So the purpose of this policy is to set out a very clear set of arrangements for how we would determine the fees which are paid by this council to the care homes in the county borough when we accommodate older people within those care homes. We've got quite a significant capacity of care homes in this county borough as set out within the report, and we commission around 45% of those care homes to meet the assessed needs of people with care and support needs, some of the most frail residents in our county borough. There are a range of care homes. Some of them are residential only. Some of them are more specialist residential home for people experiencing more advanced cognitive impairment. And there's also nursing homes for both categories of individual as well. Just to remind Cabinet that the nursing fee element is paid and funded by health boards here in Wales. So we've got statutory guidance to us as local authorities, long-standing statutory guidance going back to 2010. Which sets out, as set out in 3.4 of the report, that we must understand in quite some granular detail the cost of providing care in care homes in Wales, and all local authorities in Wales must put in place fee setting policies which reflect quite a detailed understanding of what the cost of care is. We've done this quite successfully in Bridgend over the years in that we've never been challenged via judicial review. We've always been able to reach agreement with our care home providers in terms of the cost of providing care. But it was very timely to review that set of arrangements, and particularly because there'd been quite some significant work at a national level here in Wales by the National Commissioning Board, the development of a toolkit called Agree to Agree, to take away really the contention that there could be with providers around what that fair cost of care looked like. And so we in Bridgend decided to work to that toolkit, and we commissioned the Institute of Public Care following a fair, open and transparent procurement process to support us to work independently with care homes to populate and develop this fee setting policy here in Bridgend. IPC had also been commissioned nationally by the National Commissioning Board to support their work, so it really does align in terms of the national and the local position. The care home fee setting policy is included and appended in Appendix 1 to the report. And as you can see, it sets out the approach, it provides the context and background, and how the fees that we set for care homes in Bridgend County Borough Council sit within and as part of our overall medium-term financial strategy. In terms of setting a fee for care homes, there are a number of factors which drive what that fees are. Obviously, the workforce position and care workers in Wales are paid at real living wage, and that's one of the key drivers for the cost of care, but also other matters such as the building which the providers are responsible for maintaining, training, development, energy costs, a range of factors which are all set out within the fee setting policy. What the policy doesn't do is to set the fee on an annual basis. What it does do is to set the factors which will determine that fee, and it is proposed, if you approve this afternoon, that this will be the fee setting policy until the end of March 2027. when our current contracts pre-placement agreements that you approved as Cabinet as the way that we secure care home placements here in Bridgend comes to an end, and we need to bring a paper to you as Cabinet in advance of that to set out how we would secure those arrangements going forward. So I'm very happy to recommend this policy to you as Cabinet this afternoon, and happy to take any questions. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Claire, Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm quite happy to move the report, particularly as it was done in conjunction with our care home providers. I think that's always really important. We aren't doing it to them, we're doing it together, and I think that's really important. And I think I need to bring to all members' attention, there are no further budget implications as a result of this policy. This is something that we will need to review at a later date, as Claire said, and we will need to still review the cost prices every year. Thanks very much, Leader.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. And I think it's also important to emphasise that the review that has formed the basis of this was undertaken by an independent organisation, and that independent organisation took a detailed open book cost of care analysis of the costs of care to the independent sector, and they were very open in sharing those costs. Obviously, the review date is scheduled for March 2027. Can the Director confirm that there are, of course, trigger points for reviews in that time period? The events of recent years, of course, I'm speaking about the pandemic, have shown that there can be exceptional circumstances that result in us having to change how we commission places in the independent care sector, as we did during the pandemic. And then secondly, my question was just around the work that we have undertaken on a regional footprint, because there is, of course, ever a great focus and statutory responsibilities on us to work in a regional way, including in social services. And then thirdly, so final question from me, it is just around the guidance that's been provided, and when that guidance was provided by Welsh Government, and again, I'm sure we can confirm that if that guidance were to change from Welsh Government, then of course we would look to review this policy. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Leader. If I take those questions in turn, the first one is around the trigger point. So the factors which drive the cost of care within the policy is set out within Table 1 within the paper. There could be exceptional circumstances in relation to any of those particular drivers. So if you can see at the moment that gas, electricity, water rates are 5%. Of the weighting which is driving the cost of care, that could increase or decrease, couldn't it, over future years, and that could be the example of a particular trigger where we would need to review the policy. Leader, you referred to COVID pandemic. Obviously, care homes were particularly impacted by the COVID pandemic, most importantly the impact on residents, but also the impact on the fees that care homes received, because they were restricted in terms of admissions into care homes for large periods during that time. And that impacted on their income. So there was the COVID hardship funding, which we as a local authority were able to access and benefit from Welsh Government, because normally you would expect a care home to be operating at plus 90% occupancy at any time. I was in Bridgend, usually at about 95% occupancy, so that they really are reliant on that income in terms of the businesses. So those are the sorts of triggers that we hopefully won't see again in the next number of years in the lifetime of this policy, but obviously we would act accordingly because of that statutory duty which we referred to about needing to understand the actual costs. In terms of the regional position, in Bridgend, we're part of the Cwmtaf Morgannwg Regional Partnership Board and indeed the Regional Safeguarding Board, and both of those important statutory regional partnerships have got a key interest in terms of the care home sector. So the Regional Partnership Board, chaired by our Deputy Leader, Councillor Jane Gevy, one of the subgroups of that board is a care homes group. Key pieces of work being taken forward by that care homes group. The first was around the quality standards and a regional contract arrangement in terms of reflecting those quality standards. There's a pooled budget for care home fees, which is maintained for us across the region by Rhondda and Taff County Borough Council, and so that pooled budget enables us to look at potential for jointly commissioning care home services and working together to meet particular needs. As a council, you approved in July 2021, I think it was, if I get the date right, a market stability report, which was also approved by all other councils and the health board across the region, which set out the state of the care home market and a number of commission priorities, which we continue to work with on a regional basis to look at where we can work together to meet those commissioning priorities. A key example of that is around discharge to recover and assess beds, where we're looking to meet that need across the region. And then the final question in terms of the guidance, the statutory guidance around commissioning as set out in the report actually is quite old now. It goes back to 2010. And that sets out in quite granular detail what you need to do to understand the costs of care, and that it's against that guidance which, if any judicial review were brought forward by providers, that we would be challenged. But there's been a lot of work to develop good practice about how you commission. We've got a national commissioning board in Wales, and that's chaired by a director from Caerphilly County Borough Council, Dave Street, and that board has developed a toolkit, the Agree to Agree, which is referred to in this report as 2018. At the moment, that's good practice. We've decided in Progend, in making this recommendation to you, to adopt that good practice about how you set a care home fee policy, but it may be in future years that is more mandated and comes to us in the form of statutory guidance as local authorities.
Thank you for that comprehensive response and that reassurance. Councillor Fars next, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to second the report, please.
Okay. Thank you for that, Councillor Farner. I think it should be noted that one of the requirements is around the payment of the real living wage to social care staff, and it's at least the real living wage. That is not a ceiling, that is a floor. But there is additional funding that's been made available. Bridgend, we were one of the first local authorities to adopt that approach. So the recommendation has been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement? Thank you, colleagues. We'll now receive the second report of the Corporate Director for Social Services and Wellbeing, and this is on our social services complaints policy. Claire, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. Again, I'm very pleased to present this report to you as Cabinet this afternoon, which is the purpose of which is to seek your approval of the revised social services complaints policy, which is set out as Appendix 1 to the paper. The policy has been developed in accordance with legislation and statutory guidance around social services complaints, and that legislation and statutory guidance is set out in 3.1 of the report. I think this is a really helpful policy to have refreshed and reviewed, because I think it makes far clearer the relationship between the social services complaints policy and procedures which underpin it, and the processes and procedures that we operate as a council, particularly around the relationship with the HR process and the relationship with legal processes, which from time to time progress in adult social care and children's social care. In terms of the policy itself, it sets out the different stages of the policy, the two-stage process, the stage 1 and the stage 2, and as a Cabinet you do receive an annual social services complaints report, which sets out our performance around complaints and how we seek to understand and learn lessons from any issues and representations raised, and to embed that learning. It's a very important policy for us to have in place, and it's a very public-facing policy. So if you are minded to approve this afternoon, what we would obviously be looking to do is to ensure that all of our staff and workforce across social services and wellbeing directorate understand the policy, and the processes that sit beneath receive the relevant training, and also that members of the public who would be bringing forward complaints have got access to this revised policy and public-facing information around it as well, Leader. So I just draw Cabinet's attention to the recommendation in line 1 of the report, and happy to take questions.
Thank you for that, Claire. Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm quite happy to propose the recommendations to Cabinet today. I think what I would say is that this will be an ongoing feature of Cabinet going forward, all these policies. As part of our CIW inspection, we do need to ensure that we are up to date and managing it appropriately. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Councillor Farr is next, and then Councillor Good. Councillor Farr, please.
Thank you, Leader. One question for me, Claire, is I'm just wondering why we need a separate policy for social services. Shouldn't we have one corporate policy that covers everything in regard to complaints from the public? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Farr. Claire, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Councillor Farr. We're required to have a specific social services complaints policy because of the legislation and associated statutory guidance as set out and detailed within the cover report. The two policies, I would like to give assurance to Cabinet, do complement each other in terms of the way that they work together, and our legal department in Bridgend are experts, I must say, in both policies and procedures, and help us to make sure that if somebody brings forward a representational complaint, that we manage it under the correct process. But we are legally required to have a separate social services complaints policy and procedures.
Thank you for that explanation, Claire. I can see the Deputy Leader wants to come in, so I'll bring her in before Councillor Good. I'm sure Councillor Good won't mind waiting a moment.
I am sorry, Councillor Good. Actually, it was just to reflect a minute, and I suppose it's to make sure that all members, those observing and those that are going to watch the video recording later, is that we can't do anything in social services with a complaint if there are legal proceedings ongoing, and I think we need to make that clear. I think it's something that we need to understand as members. It's really difficult to not do anything when people are complaining to you, but we need to make sure that we're following guidance and we are adhering to the Ombudsman and legal advice when we do that. So it's just to make that point. Thanks very much, Leader, and Councillor Good.
Yeah, and thank you for making that point, Deputy Leader. It is very important that we respect and do not in any way compromise any legal or court proceedings, for example, that are underway, and we know that that is often the case in matters concerning particularly vulnerable children, and that will then be explained to complainants if a complaint is made. That will be clearly set out. That is a requirement of the policy. Councillor Good is next, please.
Thank you, Leader. And as ever, I am happy to wait to hear the wisdom of the Deputy Leader, as always. Claire, thank you for the report. I was just wondering if you could give us a bit of insight into how this interacts with the vexatious complaints policy that we passed, I think, last month in Cabinet or the month before, because I think, as we all accept, both officers and Cabinet members, is that 99.9% of complaints are genuine and genuinely raising concerns about issues, but there is that very, very small percentage that can have a really devastating impact on the lives of officers. So I just wanted to check how that interacts with that policy, and to have a little bit of information on how we're protecting our social service staff from vexatious complaints. Thanks, Leader.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. It's a really important point. It gives the opportunity, doesn't it, to highlight that policy which was approved, and also to highlight the zero tolerance of this council in terms of abuse around any member of staff, indeed of the council. But we know that there's particular departments and some of my workforce are particularly vulnerable to that. In terms of the relationship between the two, I would like to say that thankfully we have a policy framework here in Bridgend in which we have policies which complement each other and work well alongside As Councillor Good has said, the vast majority of complaints that come forward are legitimate complaints. Our complaints officer, and that's a statutory role that you have to have a named officer to be the social services complaints officer, is very skilled at working with individuals to take sometimes a lot of information and to distill it very clearly into what is the matter for complaint, and so that can be properly and rightly investigated, but also then to distill in those considerations things which don't fit within the remit to be investigated as a complaint. And on occasion there will be matters which are vexatious, there will be matters which are quite personal and pertinent to individual members of staff, or do indeed constitute abuse of members of staff, which have to be managed through via that vexatious policy. I think that we have worked really well with colleagues in legal, colleagues in health and safety, and sometimes colleagues in South Wales Police when such matters have arisen, to make sure that we've got that effective whole council and multi-agency approach to implementing that policy and to supporting and protecting individuals when they require it. I think it's something that we are always focused on workforce wellbeing and supporting our workforce, and always listening to their experience of that. Sometimes I would say to Cabinet that can feel a little clunky to them, so that support that they get from us corporately, and that support in terms of line management, etc. We can't underestimate how important it is to get this right on every single case by case example that we work with. But I do think the two policies work well together. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, and thank you for highlighting that, Councillor Good. And I will take the opportunity again, because we can never emphasise it and repeat it too many times. We will not tolerate abuse, aggression, and indeed at times, sadly, thankfully a very small number of incidents, but violence towards our staff, and we will not hesitate to contact South Wales Police and work with the police to take whatever action is required to protect and support our staff. Our recommendation has been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations, please, colleagues? Thank you. In which case we will move on to the third report from the Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing, and this is on the Care Inspector of Wales's improvement check visits to Children's Social Services in November of last year. So over to you, please, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm very pleased to bring this report to you this afternoon, which is to present to Cabinet the Care Inspectorate of Wales report of their recent improvement check to our Bridgend Children's Services, and also the associated action plan, which we have developed to address the areas for continued improvement within that action plan. Just as background, I think, as you say, Leader, that this inspection took place in November last year. It was a follow-up improvement check following a performance evaluation inspection, which was taken place back in May 2022. And it is right and proper that I remind you as Cabinet that May 2022 performance evaluation inspection took CIW to advise the Council of its serious concerns in terms of children's social care here in Bridgend, and it had been a very challenging couple of years for children's social care in Bridgend. You as a Cabinet at that point in May 2022 had already approved a 3-year improvement plan for children's social care in Bridgend, and even back in May 2022 that strategic direction that you had set was recognised by the inspectors when they came in. They did identify in May 2022 a number of areas for improvement, and the improvement check was to really do what it says on the tin, to check how we were doing against those areas for improvement, and how we were improving outcomes and safeguarding and protecting our children. I think by and large the improvement check showed positive progress in terms of those priorities set, in that the majority of areas identified either showed significant improvements or some improvements, a number of areas that required further action as a consequence of that. And what I would advise you as your statutory officer in this area as Cabinet is that would be what we would expect following a a judgment of serious concerns that CIW, their overall judgment of us was that we were an authority that still required improvement in terms of our children's social care. And given that the plan that you approved was a 3-year improvement plan, to be at that place at the end of the first year of that plan would be significant progress in respect of the range of improvements that were needed. I think particularly pleasing in terms of the improvements noted were the fact that that CIW identified improved practice in terms of hearing and acting on the voice of the child within practice and within case files, and also continue to note that our workforce felt well supported in terms of their work here with us in Bridgend, and reflecting that the week of this this improvement check was also the week that we had that very high profile child practice review published for us here in Bridgend. They also recognise significant strength in terms of partnership working and corporate support to children's social care, and I think that's important to reflect, because the improvement that's needed in terms of outcomes for children is certainly not within the gift of children's social care alone. It requires that whole council approach, and indeed safeguarding is very much a multi-agency endeavour, and that is reflected very much in the report as well. Particularly, at an operational and a strategic level, that improvements had been made about how we worked with partners, and that partner confidence and that trust and confidence in children's services in Bridgend. In terms of this improvement check itself, we've also taken this outcome through our COSC2 scrutiny committee, and they've had the opportunity to scrutinise the CIW report and the action plan. And in terms of areas for continued improvement, very much all of this is a work in progress, but I would highlight 2 areas of the report for you to be particularly cognizant of. The one is around the ongoing fragility of the social care workforce, that significant efforts have been made and continue to be made to retain and recruit a high quality, well supported, motivated children's social care workforce. But we remain too reliant on agency, and that is a key vulnerability for us still in terms of further improvement checks. And the other area for urgent improvement to note in the report was around criminal exploitation and our practice in this area. And I will be happy to bring further reports to Cabinet about the work that we're doing there. In terms of the governance to oversee this improvement journey, as the report refers to, we've got both an Improvement Outcome for Children Board, which is chaired by the Chief Executive and is advised by an independent advisor to this council on our improvement journey. And we've also got a member advisory panel chaired by the Deputy Leader, which is also advised by the same improvement advisor. If I draw your attention to 4.13, 4.14 and 4.15 of the report in terms of the next steps, what I would advise you as Cabinet is that this first year has been very much about getting us out of that position where there were serious concerns, to grow that trust and confidence, and to ensure that we're safeguarding and protecting children and improving outcomes. The next step is to ensure that we're doing that in a sustainable way. I've mentioned already the high levels of agency in our workforce. I've mentioned the need to really embed some practice improvements in particular areas. And what the report sets out is the need to really now take stock about how we move from being an authority that requires improvement to one that is adequate and good within the timescale of our 3-year improvement plan, and that we'd be proposing to bring to you as Cabinet a refreshed 3-year strategic plan that looks at that whole system support and operating model and interventions to support children and families, and clearly is sustainable from both the workforce, financial and service perspective, and to do that by September of this year. So very happy to draw your attention to the recommendations in 9.1 and 9.2, and I'm very happy to take any questions, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Claire. Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm quite happy to put this report before Cabinet today. I think Claire's stolen most of what I was going to say anyway, specifically the points I was going to reference. I think what I'd like to say is my thanks to our staff, because I don't think that we could have achieved anywhere near what we've achieved without the dedication and the commitment of our staff. And I include some agency staff in there. Whilst we talk about the agency staff being a problem, actually some of our agency staff are brilliant. They've been really thoughtful, they're very minded. And, you know I referenced in council, the last time we held council, that I'd met some of our international social workers. And I think one of the points that they highlighted to me was they've never worked in an environment where they felt so welcome. And they said the things that we do for our children and families here in Bridgend is second to none. And I suppose that's an international observation, but it just tells us how good of a job we do when we do it right. Thanks very much, Leader.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader, and I'd certainly echo your comments and your compliment to the staff. They're working incredibly hard. We can see that in the report that the workload continues to be high, and the number of cases that staff are working on continues to increase, and staff have risen to those challenges. And I think it's also important to reflect on the fact that CIW, the Inspectorate, in their improvement check, did identify areas for improvement, but if you wanted to add them up, they identified far more strengths. They identified strengths in people, in prevention, in well-being, in partnerships and integration. And they identified areas for improvement in all of those areas, but they also recognised that improvements have been made in all of those areas, and the strengths outweighed the areas for improvement. So we should be heartened by that. And I also wanted to take the opportunity to thank colleagues from across the chamber who've been part of this improvement journey. They are working with us on it. The group leaders are involved in the advisory panel. I know the chair of scrutiny and that scrutiny committee takes a keen interest, rightly so, in this improvement journey that we are on, as indeed the corporate parenting cabinet committee does too. The plan that is attached is an extensive plan that there's many action points, and I'm pleased that they have been brag rated. That is helpful in terms of reference. I wanted though to ask about one area for improvement that was identified by CIW, and that is the work we're doing through our youth emotional well-being team. It was pleasing to see that CIW recognised that we've made some improvements there. So the waiting list has been shortened significantly for the different types of support, school-based counselling, wellbeing workers, and so forth. But that I cannot see it in the action plan. It may be staring back at me, but I couldn't see it yesterday. I know that, of course, this is one of the actions that is not the sole responsibility of this authority. Indeed, it's a joint responsibility with the Health Board. You would anticipate and expect very much playing a lead role, because it is about the health of our children and young people. So I wanted to ask about that and ensure that is reflected in the progress reports that we receive in the future. Claire, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. I think it shows the value, doesn't it, of bringing these reports here to make sure that there is very robust oversight by yourselves as Cabinet, because that action should have been explicitly referenced in the action plan in terms of emotional health and well-being, and indeed there are a range of actions underway. So the Health Board has received some quite significant resource and investment via the Regional Partnership Board and Regional Integration funding to support all schools across the Cwmtaf Morgannwg footprint to implement something called the NEST framework, the NOITH framework as it is called, which is a whole school approach to emotional health and well-being. I know that we received a presentation at a recent corporate parenting event from the team who were delivering that to our schools, and it's about supporting both the school workforce but also about supporting children and young people within schools as well in terms of emotional health and well-being. We've also got our own services which are provided through our Education and Family Support Directorate, and a very close eye and oversight is kept in terms of any waiting lists for those services. But those services operate as part of a continuum in terms of emotional health and well-being, and we need to work very closely. And indeed, it's not just a recommendation for us, it's a recommendation for us in conjunction as a council with the Health Board around that work with CAMHS services, and making sure that our children and young people have got timely access to CAMHS when they need it as well. That's again one of the priorities for our regional partnership board, for the Children's Partnership that sits as part of that board, to make sure that there's a full range of services right across the whole spectrum. And I'll ensure, Leader, that those recommendations and actions are reflected in that September 2023 report, which comes back to you as Cabinet.
Thank you for that, Claire. And I was reassured by that presentation, which I attended along with the Deputy Leader and other Cabinet members. Councillor Fine was next, was there as well. And it's heartening to hear that feedback from schools that have already benefited from this additional resource, and the difference that is making, that it'll be rolled out across the county borough. So Councillor Farr is next, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Claire, for the report. It's very, very thorough, and it's really pleasing to see that some progress has been made. I think I want to thank the Deputy for acknowledging that without the commitment and dedication of the staff, nothing would have been achieved. I think it's really important to give that feedback to the staff, what the Deputy Leader have said. I've got several questions for you, Claire. You've already answered one, so I've cut that one out. So as you said, this report has gone to the Scrutiny Committee. Can you tell me if any recommendations were made by that committee, and have we followed those recommendations through? That's one question. Second, can I ask what improvement have been made in regard to management oversight, as noted in the report? Last question, can you evidence what our staff are being supported? How are they being supported? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Farr, for the questions. In terms of the recommendations from the Scrutiny Committee, we only received them on Friday, but we will be going back to the Scrutiny Committee in a very timely way. The first of the recommendations was regarding the financial strategy for children's social care. As you're very aware, as Cabinet, we've been in an overspend position throughout the year, and clearly we need to work very closely as one council and with Caris and finance colleagues to make sure there's a financial strategy which supports the service to deliver statutory duties within the budget, but obviously at the moment it's struggled to do that in terms of the over-establishment workforce position linked to the caseloads, etc., as the Leader has said. The second recommendation was about the format for action plans, which was one to myself and the Chief Executive. The format for the action plan you have today is a format which is used by the Regional Safeguarding Board to monitor implementation of practice reviews and the annual plan, etc. So it seemed to be the right one to fit with this particular CIW inspection report. But I am conscious we use different ones across the council, so that's something I think we'll have some further consideration as Cabinet, Corporate Management Board, and look at how we can make sure that if we are using different formats, there's a very, very clear rationale for that. The next recommendation was regarding exploitation, and we've already shared with the Scrutiny Committee the presentation that we've been given to partner agencies around the implementation of a new model of practice around exploitation in Bridgend, which forms part of some work which we're taking forward across the Regional Safeguarding Board structure. And the final recommendation referred to the rapid review, which is referred to in the report, of contact arrangements in Bridgend, and asked that we share with the Scrutiny Committee the recommendations and progress against that rapid review, which we undertook ourselves. And yes, we'll share those recommendations with the Scrutiny Committee. In terms of management oversight, as a cabinet, you approved, I think at the last but one cabinet meeting, a new supervision policy across social services and wellbeing. And supervision obviously is a fundamental, as you know, Councillor Farr, of social work practice, good social work practice, and we co-produced that new supervision policy with the workforce, and that's one very important element of the improved management oversight, which was evidenced by CIW. We've also reviewed our quality assurance framework to make sure that that is robust and effective, and that forms another very important part of management oversight. We've looked at things like the structure of our meetings, legal planning meetings, etc., to make sure that those are embedded in, and that management oversight is being very well recorded in terms of case supervision with around particular casework. We've also strengthened management, and this is absolutely critical again, isn't it, to the quality of practice. I think, as Councillor Gebbie has referred on, we've actually had to bring in some very, very experienced and excellent agency workforce to support that in some key areas of what we're doing. But the important thing is that we learn from their experience, and that the sustainability plan then reflects how we take forward the experience that they've brought to us and embed it into our day-to-day practice. And then just to come on to the final one, the support for the workforce. I think some of the changes, which again, are very much gratefully received by the service as a consequence of decisions that Cabinet and then Council have made around the budget, are helping to support our social workers. So our social work support officer have now been formally launched, if I put it that way, from the 1st of April into the service, and will really be very key in freeing up social workers just to do social work. So that's one element of the support. We obviously have quite extensive wellbeing offer to all our workforce as a council, but then in addition to that, overall workforce offer which anybody accesses, there's been some very bespoke trauma-informed support into the children's social care workforce where needed, because of some of the very tragic and traumatic for our workforce circumstances that they have had to manage over the last year. Other things are far less formal, if I put it that way. If you go down to MASH or IAA in Ravenscourt at any point, they will tell you about the impact of the therapy dog coming into them, and it might sound a little bit glib, but if you ask that workforce, that has been one of the things which has made a massive impact to their well-being, and feel quite different about coming into work as a consequence of some of that softer stuff, far more social events, and a real buzz around parts of the workforce. And finally, just to conclude on that, talking about buzz around the workforce, the Deputy Leader and myself attended 2 launch events for Signs of Safety, our new model of social work practice. We had to put on 2 because there was so much interest in people and partners attending. But again, the real enthusiasm from the workforce in the room, and the fact that we were giving them the tools to do the job, I think probably spoke volumes, didn't it, Councillor Gebbie, in terms of how the workforce are now feeling supported to practice social work in the way that they want to practice. So those are just a few examples from one end of the extreme with the dog to the other.
Thank you for that, and encouraging to hear that feedback as well from staff. Thank you for that, Councillor Farr. Councillor Williams is next, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Claire, for the report. And I certainly recognise the improvement that's been made in the service area. I can take you to the action plan, and the first point I'd like to make is, and that's basically as a general point, because there would be people watching this that are sort of like maybe not familiar with the BRAG status. I know this is not a key attached to that, so maybe you could just briefly explain what BRAG stands for. Then the blue, red, amber, green, and then you'll note that there are just the one red and a few ambers in there. And I suppose what I'm asking is how far into the red these are, because it's if you get it, there'll be a gauge on a thermometer. Know, is it really hot or is it just a little bit hot? And are we making progress to turn the reds into greens? And then the point I would like to make then is that when will we be getting a progress report on that? And monitor progress. And finally, is there anything you need from us as a cabinet to enable you to achieve that your aims and to get to all action points on green?
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. So over to Claire for the temperature gauge.
That final question, Councillor Williams, was a fantastic invitation. But I'll start with question one. In terms of the key, I will ensure that in future action plans that the key is included, because as you say, members of the public might come back to this report if they're not viewing the meeting directly and might be wondering around that. The blue means complete. The green means that we're on track to complete within the timescales. The amber is, that is work in progress, but we're worried about meeting the timescales as set out. And then the red means that we're not on track at this moment in time, so need to put in place some alternative sets of actions to achieve. The one that is red is the one around workforce, and there are green shoots in terms of workforce. Some of the things I've highlighted there in terms of sort of the positivity, and I would highlight to you again, because it does need to continue to be said, that despite all of the challenge at the time of this improvement check and the previous inspection, indeed back in May, the workforce still remained positive in their survey reports and indeed in the focus groups about the support they were receiving by these council by this council. So that is important to note. The reason that it's red, for the reasons as set out, is that we are still very reliant on agency to fulfil our statutory duties. It's one of those things that in terms of sustainable improvement and change, when you've got a agency workforce where there is turnover of staff and agency workers only have to give us a week's notice before they leave, that can impact clearly, if they do that, on the quality of work. And it can also impact from a strategic perspective. When you're trying to embed a new model of social work practice, you need people here who have committed their careers to us here in Bridgend, and we are too high in terms of agency numbers, both in our IAA service, where we still have a managed team, and you know that we brought a paper forward around that into Cabinet, and also in our safeguarding localities particularly. When I talk about green shoots, Councillor Gebbie has mentioned the international recruits. We've got 2 of them now here in Bridgend, and more en route to join us as a service. Small numbers, but they are very, very welcome and will make a real difference over time. We've had a little bit of success with the recruiting newly qualified workers. I have to say that more of them are going to adult services than children's, but nonetheless we've been really trying to put out and in terms of newly qualified. We continue to be successful in recruiting into management roles. I've been interviewing today for the new deputy head post, and there's a new, more interviews next week for that post, and really, really high caliber candidates and really enthusiastic about wanting to come here and work with us in Bridgend. So that's hugely encouraging, isn't it? Our Grow Our Own scheme, thanks to the Chief Exec and to Caris for reviewing the EMR position to enable us to go back out and recruit more into our Grow Our Own scheme, and that really is the medium longer term solution to the challenges that we face in terms of workforce. But all of this is not impacting quickly enough for us to be able to reduce those proportions of agency workforce as quickly as we would like, hence the red status. But anything that we can do, and it is a corporate ask, really, we work very, very closely with colleagues in HR around our workforce planning, looking at all those roles like the social work support officer roles and others, about where we don't need professionally qualified social workers, and we can take work off them in order that they can do social work. All of that is very much the highest priority. Certainly I've got as director, and certainly one of our highest priorities as a council. In terms of the ask to yourself as Cabinet, I think one of the key asks for me is that continued corporate support and join up to the challenges. It is a challenge to us as a council, isn't it, to have a children's services set of arrangements which requires improvement, and it very much takes a whole council approach. In the same way it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a whole council to improve children's services, and then a whole council with partners indeed. You know, the work that we'll be doing now over the next number of months to bring that sustainability plan back to you will require input again from all parts of the council, from HR in terms of the workforce plan, from finance in terms of the financial strategy, working very closely with education and family support in terms of that continuum through early help into very focused prevention services at the edge of statutory intervention, at the edge of care, and at the edge of child protection registration, and indeed step down from. So that continued whole council approach is absolutely critical to our sustainability, and to go from requires improvement to adequate to good. So that's my ask of you as a Cabinet, really, is to keeping on with this improvement journey, because it's that whole council approach which has been so critical to the improvements we've seen today.
Thank you for that, Claire. Take the opportunity to thank you for your professional leadership alongside the political leadership that's been provided by the Deputy Leader and all Cabinet members and all members of the Corporate Management Board as well. And that's why it's important, isn't it, that whole one council approach and support for this. I know the Deputy Leader wants to come back in.
I do want to come back in, Leader. Thank you very much. This is going to be slightly different, however. We keep talking about regional partnership working, we keep talking about children, and we keep talking about CAMHS here this afternoon. I was fortunate enough to attend a mental health event with young people, and they designed and came up with all their own words for poems, for songs. It was a real hackathon. I was delighted to be there, and I can't tell you that I went for the free pizza. However, what I can do is read you one of the poems that the young people came up with that night. And it was all about CAMHS, and I think it's a really good description of where we are, where we've been, and where we want to go. So here goes. So I probably won't do it justice, and I'm really sorry, Jenny. But what about the bad and dull? Do we simply stand aside, remain silent, and let those words rattle around in our skull? Hidden, abandoned, the fear of the unknown. I've tried this before, been let down by the system. And what's the point? I cry. We've been here before. There is just no way to beat the system. I'm simply a cog, just spinning without purpose, without cause. Words released into the atmosphere, lost forevermore. Who was there to listen when my heart was so sore? Despair, dishonour, disillusionment to the core. The system is broken, erupts an almighty roar. Community, workforce, commissioners all scorned, with previous hate and a closed door. But words are powerful. They are the most powerful thing we own. So let's use them to settle the score. The system is broken, but perhaps not anymore. The system was broken is maybe much more true. That shift from is to was, the hope of something new. The possibility of what if and what can I do, to take responsibility of my words and help them to join with others and form a crew, to stand up and be counted, make my experiences mean something, to someone, anyone, everyone who can help this dream reality come true, a world where words are respected and valued and used, understood by their powerful nature to shape and to create new. Possibilities, endless possibilities of what we all can do to make this world a better place for me and for you. So next time you choose to let your words loose, remember their powerful nature to bring life or death to the world around you.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. And it's appropriate that the last contribution we heard on this item was from a young person who was part of the system. The term system was used in that as part of it, as one of the children and young people that we have responsibility for. So the recommendation has been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations, please? Thank you, colleagues. We'll now move on to the final report from the Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing, and this is on the proposed medication policy. Claire, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. Happy to bring you another policy for your consideration this afternoon. I think, as the Deputy Leader has already indicated, there'll be more policies coming forward for consideration by Cabinet over the next while to make sure that we've got a completely up-to-date suite of policies in social services and wellbeing, and particularly to support our regulated services here in Bridgend. So this is an important policy in terms of regulated social care services. It is a medication policy which we are required to have for regulated services under the Regulation and Inspection of Care Wales Act, and the policy covers all of our regulated care services that we provide as a council. So that is residential care homes for children, residential care homes for adults, and a range of domiciliary care services, including domiciliary care services that reach into supported living environments. This policy, I think, is very timely and is very much welcome from the service perspective, because it reflects a lot of work that's been happening again nationally and regionally as well as locally to develop really good guidance for care staff who are in the front line in doing really important work to support individuals, and in some cases to administer medication to individuals, which is one of the sort of most risky things we probably do as a council, isn't it? And it's very important that we do that in accordance with really evidence-based policy, practice guidance, training to support those staff to undertake that duty on our behalf. So the policy is attached for your consideration. It's been subject to significant engagement with colleagues in the NHS and pharmacists who are obviously experts in the field of medication. We're lucky to benefit from integrated teams here in Bridgend, where pharmacies are part of the integrated set of team arrangements, and importantly, engagement with our staff and with trade union colleagues in its development. So very happy to take any questions and draw your attention to recommendation at 9.1 of the report. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Claire. Bring the Deputy Leader in, please.
Thank you very much. I would agree with Claire's comments. It's the riskiest undertaking that we do as a council, and they are one of the lowest paid members of staff. And whilst I know we can't do anything about that as Cabinet here today, actually that is a big cause for concern for me. I don't think we pay our care staff appropriately, nor do I think we pay them fairly. However, this is just to protect their well-being and their safety, and to protect us as a council. I am quite happy to recommend this medication policy to Cabinet today. What I would refer you to is that all the costs are met from our existing budget, and I'm really pleased actually to see the community pharmacy team involved in the projection of this policy now. Thank you very much, Leader.
Like you, I'm pleased to see the involvement of the specialists. They are the specialists in this field and involved in the development of this policy, and indeed see that they're going to be involved, we hope, in the training as well, because the most important part of any policy is the implementation of that policy, and we want to equip the workforce and the managers with the skills to enable this policy to be implemented in our registered settings. Councillor Farr is next, please.
Thank you, Leader. I think you've answered one part of my question. Can I ask, Claire, who have you consulted and involved in designing this policy? As you're aware, our care staff are not healthcare workers. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. Claire, please.
Yeah, this policy has been, the development of this policy has been led by our social care workforce development team. So we get specific funding through a grant from Welsh Government, don't we, to have a grant to support the development of the social care registered workforce. So it's appropriate that the policy officer who has led this sits within that workforce development team. The development of the policy has involved pharmacy professionals, as referred to, and you know, very beneficial for us in Bridgend to have those embedded within integrated teams and integrated management arrangements. It has involved the workforce and trade unions, as well as the registered managers and responsible individuals for the services who are responsible for the implementation of the policy.
Thank you for that. I'm sure that answers the question, Councillor Farr. Okay, one question for me. from me is on the scope of this policy, and this clearly is for regulated services in the County Borough Council, but we also have the use of medication in services that are not regulated, but services that we have some responsibility for. So can you confirm the scope of this policy? I'm specifically thinking about our special schools, where I know that quite often children and young people will need and have the support of medication, and also I was going to specifically ask about supported living settings and their coverage by this policy. Claire, please.
Thank you for the question, Leader. This policy is very specifically for Bridgend County Borough Council provided regulated care services. So that's our care homes and domiciliary care provision, which is provided by us as a council. In terms of special schools, they would have their own policies as a school governing body. They would have to adopt those policies. I know in terms of our biggest special school here in Bridgend, that's a service which has got NHS members of staff working into that school as well, doesn't it? So it's similarly to this policy where we've drawn on the expertise of the NHS, those NHS staff will have informed the development of that policy there. But yeah, the governing body will have adopted their own policy in terms of medication within a school setting. In terms of supported living, for the council's provided supported living, the care elements in that supported living for people predominantly with learning disabilities is provided by a registered domiciliary care service. So those domiciliary care workforce as part of supported living would comply with this policy, and this policy applies to them. We also commission supported living and indeed a range of other domiciliary care and residential services. Each one of those individual providers are required by the Inspectorate, Care Inspectorate Wales, and indeed by ourselves as a commissioner to have their own medication policies which would comply with the standards within this policy but might differ in some elements of detail.
Thank you for that, Claire. That's helpful to know, and not for today, but I'd be interested in knowing that medication policy at our local schools has been updated. I'm sure it has been, but that's not necessarily for today or for you. Okay, thank you, Claire. The recommendation's been moved. Do I have a seconder? And is everyone in agreement with the recommendation? Thank you, colleagues. So we'll now move on to the report of the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support on the appointment of local authority governors. And I can see that we've been joined by the Head of Education and Family Support today, so warm welcome to Nicola. So I assume apologies from the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support, and I'll hand over to you then, please, Nicola. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Apologies, the Corporate Director has got called to a very last-minute urgent meeting, so it's me. Okay, so this report, the purpose of it is to seek approval for Cabinet from the appointment of local authority governors to the school governing bodies as listed in number 4.1. So in accordance with the Council's guidance on the appointment of local authority governors, officers have considered all the applications received for current vacancies, and the 6 current local authority vacancies listed in the table at 4.1. There were only 6 candidates, and all 6 candidates met the criteria for appointment. Therefore, the recommended appointments are listed there in section 4.1, and the recommendation is that Cabinet approve the appointments as detailed there.
Thank you for that, Nicola. Councillor Blundell, and I should add at this stage that Councillor Blundell wasn't able to speak earlier. Well, he was able to speak, we assume, but we weren't able to listen to him speak due to technological problems. But he has declared a personal interest on this item due to him being a member of a governing body that is proposed that we appoint to this afternoon. So over to you, please, Councillor Blundell.
Well, first off, I hope you can hear me, Leader. Fabulous. At least we figured out what the problem was. Okay. First of all, I would like to move the report, Leader, and just to say, as I usually do when we have this report, to say thank you to those who put their name forward. Being a governor is a very important task, and I know these 6 members who have put their names forward of the public will do so. Take that responsibility very as much as one can. I just want to again add my plea. There are still plenty of vacancies. I see lots of members who are listening to us, and there will be lots of members of this council who will be watching this recording later, and also members of the public. Please feel free to apply. You can find this on the BCBC Council's BCBC website on how to apply to become an LEA governor, because it is a very important role, and I would recommend all members to do it, to take as much diligence in their school as physically possible. So thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Councillor Blundell, and for moving the recommendations. Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm happy to second the report, and I too would encourage anybody to be a governor of this school. I get so much enjoyment from it, and I do things now that I haven't been able to do since my own children were small, like go to community fetes and plays and judge competitions and all sorts of things, never mind all the policies and procedures and finance issues. But I get so much joy from it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. So the recommendation has been moved and seconded. Everyone in agreement? Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Nicola. We'll now receive a report from the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change, and our Section 151 officer. So over to you, please, Caris.
Many thanks, Leader. As you said, I'm Caris Lord. I'm the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change. So the purpose of this report this afternoon is to seek Cabinet approval for a council tax discretionary relief policy. Cabinet is also being asked to approve an amendment to the council scheme of delegation of functions to enable any applications received to be dealt with in a swift and timely manner. So Section 13A of the Local Government Finance Act 1992 provides the billing authority with discretionary powers to reduce council tax liability where national discounts and exemptions cannot be applied. The council does not currently have an agreed policy, and the objective of this policy is to offer financial assistance to council taxpayers who are experiencing exceptional financial hardship. Each application for relief would be treated strictly on its own merits, and all council taxpayers would be treated both fairly and equally. The proposed policy is attached for you this afternoon as Appendix A of your report, and it outlines 3 categories of eligibility, namely, as I said, exceptional financial hardship, a crisis situation, and some other circumstances. So the details are contained within the policy attached to your report. No reduction in liability would be granted where a statutory exemption or discount could be awarded, and any discretion awarded would also only be awarded for a fixed period of time. It is proposed that determinations on the applications would be made by the taxation section, with appeals against those decisions being made by myself as the Section 151 officer, together with the Cabinet member for resources. As this is a discretionary policy, the cost of any awards granted would have to be met from the overall council tax income collected during the financial year. So if I could, Leader, I'd just take you to Section 9 of the report, where Cabinet is recommended to approve the proposed council tax discretionary relief policy at Appendix A, and also to approve a change to the scheme of delegation of functions as set out in paragraph 4.3. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks very much, Caris. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thanks you, Caris, for the report. I think as been highlighted in the report, use of this policy would be in exceptional circumstances only. It's there as a tool, so if there is a disaster of any kind that beholds on a householder, then we have a means to try and assist over a very short period. So happy to move the report, Leader.
Thanks for that, Councillor Williams. Do I have a seconder for that?
Happy to second that, Leader.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Spalmzik. And I note it is underlined in 3.2, and this is an important part. These are for very exceptional circumstances, but it's helpful to have that identified in the policy and the report. Moved and seconded. Everyone in agreement with the recommendation? Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Caris. We will now move on to the first report of the Corporate Director for Communities, and that report is on the consultation on community recycling centres, and we have been joined by the head of service, who is going to take us through the report. Over to you, please, Zach.
Thank you, Chair. So this report asks the Cabinet for approval to enter into a public consultation, as you mentioned, on the closure of our free community recycling centres, or CRC sites as I'll refer to them, each for 1 day in the week moving forward. Members may recall that as part of the medium-term financial strategy for 23 to 24 and moving forward, on the 1st of March 2023, Council approved, amongst others, a budget reduction proposal of £50,000, which would be recurring, and this was based around this necessary closure of each of the CRC sites for 1 day per week. The current situation now is that we are asking Cabinet, therefore, to approve formal consultation on that option of reducing the CRC sites in accordance with that MTFS saving. For those that might not be familiar, the sites are operated 7 days a week. And I would bring members' attention to it, and as reading through the report, I looked at 4.4, and it mentioned that the consultation would start in early April 2023, and I do think that's probably a little bit optimistic, given it's the 11th now, and we've got to get it out the door, but the questions are being prepared. So the main point, though, is it will start in April 2023, and it will be a 12-week consultation period. In terms of Equalities Act's implications, there were no significant or unacceptable equality impacts as a result of this report. And in terms of future gen, certainly delivering the financial budget reductions ensures the long-term sustainability of these sites, keeping them affordable and available for the public to use into the future. Financial implication sections of the report, well, we've already covered off what we're trying to achieve via this action, which is the saving of the £50,000. In terms of costs associated with implementation, the consultation process itself, etc., these will be met from within existing staffing budgets, which leads to the recommendations, which is the Cabinet note, as well as actually approving the consultation request, which is the main purpose, the Cabinet note that also there will be a further Cabinet report at the end of the 12-week period. We will come back with the recommendations from the consultation process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Zach. Councillor Spalmzik, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Zach, for that. And I've just got a couple of points perhaps to try and clarify what we're doing here, because we have, as a whole council, agreed but the saving, the £50,000 part of the MTFS. So in some ways, we've agreed that we need to make £50,000 saving from this action of reducing the opening of the centres 1 day per week, but it's not 1 day across all centres on the same days. The consultation I'm seeing open is get motivated, because I'm assuming a lot of people will say we don't want them to be closed an extra day, but we've already decided we need to make the saving, so there needs to be a closure 1 day per week to make the £50,000 saving. So the questions I suppose we need to see more detail is to get from people is what days of the week they at least use, and we've got data perhaps on that as well. Because clearly the weekends they're well used, but I've gone to some of these centres and remaining the weekday, and you can drive straight in, which is great. So it's about which one will be shut on which days to make sure I take it the end result where there'll always be at least 2 centres open on any 1 day, and including weekends, all 3 will be open. So we're only talking about that Monday to Friday period, which ones we shut, which one of them gets shut on 1 day. But I look forward to the conversation. Unfortunately, April we're going to be into August, September before the conversation ends and it comes back to Cabinet. There will be 6 months of the year gone. So this year, the £50,000 saving already is a challenge itself to be able to achieve that. So that's for further discussion in due course. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Spancer, Zach, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, just to agree really with the points made. The consultation itself will inform the discussions that we have with the current provider in terms of the most appropriate days, but the points made around what seems the most sensible and logical way of closing the sites. I agree. Closing them all on the same day isn't the the sensible way to go. But certainly, I think the feedback from the public will help inform those decisions.
Thank you, Leader. And just put this in order, I would like to move the report as well.
Thank you for that. Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader, and I'm quite happy to second the report. What I would ask, I do have a couple of questions for you, please, Zach, and one of those is some clarity on the 3 sites. Who are they? Because not one of them is mentioned during the report, and the public are watching this, and that's what they'll know. They won't know what a CRC is, so there's no point doing that. So we need some words, and I think I'd like some clarity on the cost of Pyle CRC not opening as yet. I realise that is not our responsibility, but what is the additional cost to us in relation to not having that licence from NRW yet?
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Zach, please.
Yeah, so the 3 sites for members of the public watching later on or that may not be aware of where they are, certainly the current ones are at Tivigstone, Birmennin Industrial Estate, and the one that is in my stag. And yes, I do tend to use terminology like CRC site, but community recycling centre, or as my dad always used to call it, the tip. But yes, certainly not what I should be calling it now. Yeah, Pyle is frustrating. We've been going through a long-winded process via our current contractor with NRW to obtain the licence that is necessary to be able to operate at that site. Small technicalities have prevented it from actually opening to date, and the process is still rumbling on and is being pursued vigorously, but nevertheless, has a significant timeline to it. I can get cost breakdowns to you. In terms of revenue impact, probably the biggest impact is the fact that we're still having to pay for the rental at the Tivigstone site, because that isn't a site that we own, whereas Pyle is a site within our ownership. Also frustrating, though, is we've spent an awful lot of money developing the Pyle site, and whilst that's not a revenue impact, it's a capital one-off spend. It's frustrating to have spent that much money and yet not be getting the benefit from it. So we certainly are pursuing that, and we all look forward to Pyle opening.
Thank you for that, Zach, and it is disappointing that we haven't yet had the licence from Natural Resources Wales, and I will be writing again to Natural Resources Wales, because I know that's a disappointment shared by all Cabinet members, and I'm sure by all members, because apart from the licence, the site is ready to be opened, and it could be opened and it should be opened so that the public can use it. On this consultation, I I think it's important that that the public know that weekends would not be selected because of how busy the community recycling centres are on a weekend. And our current thinking is, but we'll have to wait and see what comes back from the consultation. Our current thinking is that we close the community recycling centres on different days, as Councillor Spanswick has explained, so that on any one day of the week, so 7 days of the week, at least 2 of our community recycling centres will be open, and for most the days of the week, all 3 recycling centres will be open 7 for those 7 days. The recommendation has been moved and seconded. Is everyone in support of that recommendation? Please. Yeah, and we'll get that consultation out with that quick consultation out with that clarity as well. Just to be clear, in case I wasn't clear, what I was just explaining was about that that coverage of a community recycling centres being open, but we'll see what the public say. Being open, there will be a community recycling centre open across those 7 days, but it's whether it's which days one of the community centres will be open, but the other 2 will be open is the current thinking. Okay, thank you everyone. Next item on the agenda, the final report is again a report to Corporate Director for Communities, and the report is on the Valleys Regional Park and the future funding of the Valleys Regional Park. Zach, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a positive report, this one, that discusses the potential for an extension to the Valleys Regional Park arrangements that are currently in place, and funding that is available to go with that. Members will recall that BCBC has a role as the host authority for the current Valleys Regional Park arrangement, and the purpose of this report is set out in that first paragraph. The two main actions within it. One is to extend our current tenure as host, which would naturally have expired in June, to the end of the financial year, and as we'll talk about later on, and that's really as a minimum. And secondly, to accept a grant that has been made available to enable this to take place. Going through the report, section 3.1 of the report lists out for the recollection of members all of the authorities that are involved in the Valleys Regional Park arrangement. Section 3.1 to section 3.5 of the report I won't go through in detail, but that really recaptures the vision and purpose of the Valleys Regional Park undertaking, which is highly commendable work that has been done for these areas. The remainder of section 3 of the report then goes on to talk about the steps that have resulted in Bridgend acting as the host authority for the delivery team for the Valleys Regional Park, and how that has been funded thus far in the main by the ESF, or European Social Fund, and that is, I touched on earlier, due to end this June. So moving forward, with the original position being that the VRP would end and our role as host would end this June, discussions have taken place with the board for the VRP and with the Deputy Minister for Arts and Sports in that regard. And there was an indication back in March 23 that Welsh Government grant funding may be able to be made available to cover the shortfall that would allow it to continue to the end of the financial year. BCBC proceeded in discussions with Welsh Government in line with that potential, and as a result of these discussions, a grant offer was forthcoming of £265,000, which would cover the costs through to the end of the current financial year and would provide a basis for planning and looking at a longer term approach so that hopefully the VRP or equivalent type of arrangements that can bring benefit to these areas would be able to continue in the long term, but absolutely assuring a continuation right the way through the current financial year. So that's where we're at the moment. I'll skip to the financial implications. Obviously, we're talking about the £265,000 grant offer being accepted, which is the request to Cabinet members, and it would solely be for that purpose, and the role of the Section 151 officer would be to ensure that the purpose of the grant offer is the sole use of the funding that would be received. The recommendations ask Cabinet to note the progress made to date, to approve the request from the VRP board that BCBC continues its role as host, and subject to all of the normal delegations and agreements, that we accept the funding offer from Welsh Government. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Farr, please.
Thank you, Zach, for the report, and I think it's really pleasing that we're going to have this grant to continue the work that we are doing. So I'd like to move the report. I've got one question, please, Zach. Can I ask what happens after this financial year? Because you said this grant's only until this financial year. What happens after that, and to the work that we are doing, please?
Yeah. So part of this year will be used to answer that question. I couldn't say exactly now. The report does mention an approach with lead authorities potentially providing funding for the administration of the VRP going forward as an option, but that will be what comes out of the work that we do this year to secure the future for VRP or something equivalent.
Thank you, Councillor Spanzik, and over to you, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to second the report firstly, and following on from that point, I think on paragraph 4.3, it's great that we have in the Welsh Government the funding through to the end of the financial year 23-24. But the long-term approach, it says the third bullet point about developing a viable business plan to secure sustainable funding for VRP, which is by the 31st of March 29. But I think does that mean through to the 31st of March 29 to have a long-term plan then for the rest of the 2020s?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it'd be the objective to have it as a self-sustaining initiative by that point in time. That would be the objective.
Thank you. You happy to second that?
I did second Leader. Yeah.
So firsted and seconded. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations? I can see the Deputy Leader wants to come in.
It was only very briefly, and I appreciate that we're making all these strategic plans, which is great, but we've talked about workforce difficulties here. Is there the staff available to appoint to run this? I suppose is my question. Thanks very much, Zach.
Yeah, so there's current staff in place, some of whom are on secondment from Welsh Government that work for us as part of the host authority. So it's a case of continuing with the arrangements that we have in place.
Thank you for that, Zach. Thank you, Deputy Leader. So recommendations moved and seconded. Everyone in agreement, please. Okay, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Farr. Thank you, Zach. That was the last report on today's agenda. So as there are no urgent items, we will bring this meeting to a close, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow at the next meeting of Full Council. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you all. Thank you, Leader.